is Sierra Doyle, and this speech is about how the Granite City Food and Brewery tip policy and hourly wage is unfair to its waitstaff. According to the U.S. Department of Labor and the Fair Labor Standards Act, states that employers are required to pay an absolute minimum cash wage of $2.13 an hour for tipped employees. However, some states require employers to pay a full state minimum wage to tipped employees on top of their actual earned tips. For example, according to minimumwage.org, Washington requires employers to pay $12 an hour to servers plus their tips. In Kansas, requirements like this do not exist, which means that employers can pay waitstaff as little as $2.13 an hour legally. Although this doesn't seem fair, many employers in Kansas still choose to pay their servers a decent hourly wage, despite the fact that they are not required to. The restaurant establishment I currently work at, however, pays its waitstaff barely above the minimum requirement at $2.35 an hour. Plus, we have to tip out at 3% of our sales each shift to the busser and bartender, and a minimum of $4 to both the server assist and the food runner. This takes an unnecessarily large portion of the tips we make each shift. Therefore, I am proposing that Granite City Food and Brewery change their tip policy to allow servers to tip out based on what they make each shift, not based off of their sales, and to revise the hourly wage of various staff members. On an average 6-hour shift at Granite City, servers will have around $1,000 in sales. According to Forbes.com and to most common knowledge, customers are expected to tip 20% of their bill. Therefore, servers are expected to make 20% in tips total based off of those sales. This means that if we have $1,000 in sales for one shift, we should make $200 in tips. However, this rarely happens. What employers never account for is that many customers simply do not tip 20%. Some do not even tip at all. There will always be customers who do not tip fairly. So when we are expected to make $200 based off of 20% of our sales, we are often left with much less every shift. For the purpose of this speech, let's say that each server is left with 15% of their sales in tips. That's $150 for one shift, which doesn't sound too bad, right? Well, it wouldn't be so bad if we didn't have to tip out. Despite not making an expected 20% in tips, we are still required to tip out 3% of our sales to the busser and bartender. For a $1,000 sales shift, that would mean we have to tip out $30. Now, the $150 we made earlier is down to $120 in tips, but we still aren't done yet. We still have to tip out a minimum of $4 to the food runner and $4 to the server assist. According to the actual food runner and server assist, they get tipped an average of $7 an hour, or $7 from each server on an average shift. So after tipping out 2 more people $7 each, the $120 in tips we earned earlier is now down to $106, which is what we are left with at the end of the shift. So instead of making 20% in tips, as servers should make, we end up making an average of 10% in tips every shift, half of what we should be making. On top of all this, we only get paid $2.35 an hour. This means that we get very little to no paycheck every 2 weeks after taxes. Most of the time, I get from $0 to $10 every 2 weeks on my paycheck after working a $30 work week. Although the busser, food runner, and server assist make the same hourly wage as waitstaff, the bartenders make $6 an hour plus customer tips plus tips from the servers. Not only does this leave them with more money at the end of every shift than the servers, but they also receive much higher paychecks every 2 weeks. I value having a bartender, busser, food runner, and server assist. They deserve to make a fair pay just as much as servers do. However, I believe that the current tip-out policies in place at Granite City prove to be unequal and unfair to the waitstaff. There are a few changes that I have in mind that I believe could fix this problem, and I believe that it is not too much to ask from an established and wealthy food chain. First off, I would like to raise the hourly wage for waitstaff. Many surrounding restaurant chains pay their waitstaff from $3.50 to $4.50 an hour. Although this does not seem like much, a little goes a long way when it comes to paychecks. Considering that some states are required to pay an hourly of $12 an hour, I believe that even a dollar raise is not too much to ask for. Secondly, I believe that the policy should be changed so that servers are allowed to tip out based off our tips each shift and how much we feel the bartender and busser helped us out during that shift, rather than our sales each shift. There have been many times that my customers never ordered a single bar drink during a shift, yet I was still forced to tip out the bartender a percentage of my sales when they did nothing for me in return. The same goes for bussers. There have been many shifts that I have cleaned every one of my own tables before the busser could make time to get to them, yet I still have to tip them out based off sales. I believe that we should be allowed to not tip out the bartender or busser if they did not help us during an entire shift. Thirdly, I think that Granite City should pay the food runner and server assist an hourly wage similar to that of a host or expo position. This would save us from having to tip out 2 extra people each shift. The advantages to these solutions are that the servers get to keep more of the hard-earned money that we make each shift, making it easier for us to pay our bills without overworking ourselves and shifts every week. Not only will we make more money every shift, but we will actually receive a bigger paycheck every 2 weeks from a raised hourly wage that won't get taken by taxes. Also, the bartenders and bussers will not have a guaranteed tip amount, which means that they will be encouraged to work harder and be more motivated every shift, making the overall flow of the restaurant more efficient and effective. In conclusion, the current tip-out policy at Granite City is unfair to the waitstaff and needs to be changed, not only for the benefit of the waitstaff, but to make a more efficient restaurant chain. If you would like to get involved in this fight, you can contact Granite City's corporate offices at 952-215-0660, email at corporate@gcfb.net, or visit the Granite City official website at gcfb.com. Thank you for your time. I look forward to big changes at Granite City in the near future.